Torches hiss against damp stone as you walk a corridor no history book wants you to see. The smell of tallow and iron clings to the air, thicker than breath, and each footstep echoes like a verdict. You are not Anne Boleyn with her clean, swift end. You are one of the others, whose names were buried under silence, whose lives were not cut short but stretched thin, pulled apart by rules, rituals, and a husband who could turn love into punishment. Silk gowns feel like chains, sweet perfumes burn like smoke, and the crown you thought meant safety now tilts heavy on your head. Somewhere a door slams, and you know it is for you. You will not lose your life tonight. You will lose something slower, something worse. You are 17, and the world smells of beeswax and roses. The court is alive with music that seems to hum against the walls, and every glance is a test of grace. The tapestries glow under candlelight, scenes of conquest and devotion stitched by hands that believed kings were gods. This is the world Henry built, a court so dazzling it could blind you to its teeth, and he, the center of it all, moves like a sun no one dares to eclipse. To be seen by him is to believe yourself chosen, worthy, untouchable. His smile is heavy, with promise, his words softened with honey, and when he names you his wife, the court gasps, not at your beauty, but at your destiny. But you do not see the small, invisible hooks in the silk he drapes across your shoulders. You do not hear the quiet shuffle of servants who will later lock doors. The crown sits light at first, like a dream made metal, but beneath it runs the quiet current of expectation. Children, sons, loyalty, perfection, all whispered, all demanded, and as you walk the polished floors of Whitehall, trailing satin and jewels, the air grows thicker. There are rules unspoken here, more binding than chains. Where to sit, when to speak, how to smile when your heart trembles. Tonight, there are no threats, no swords, only candles flickering low and shadows stretching long, promising that the cost of being queen is rarely written in blood. It is written in silence, the music softens, and the applause fades. But the weight of his gaze does not. Henry is a man who can summon kingdoms with a gesture, and to be near him is to feel both warmth and frost. Behind the gold-threaded smiles of the courtiers you sense something unsaid, an undercurrent of fear disguised as loyalty. The women around you, painted in pearls and lace, have learned the art of silence. Their laughter rings light, but never deep. Every touch is calculated, every word measured, because here the wrong tone can echo louder than treason. At night, when the feasts end and the corridors darken, the palace feels different. The air smells of ink and iron. The walls seem closer, the windows smaller. Servants glide like shadows, their faces unreadable. They know things you do not. Names whispered in confessionals, tears swallowed behind closed doors. And as Henry leans close, his voice low and almost tender, you feel the shape of something larger than love forming around you. It is duty, it is spectacle, it is ownership disguised as affection. He does not ask if you are ready. The crown never asks. And somewhere beyond the music and the wine, you hear it. The quiet sound of locks turning. A reminder that this palace is both stage and prison. You were chosen, yes, but chosen means watched, measured, tested. The gentle trap has closed, and you are its brightest jewel. The days blur into ceremony, each more dazzling than the last, yet beneath the polished rhythm, unease grows like ivy. The silks you once adored now feel heavier. The crown tighter, as if reminding you that beauty is a kind of armor. And a cage. The court watches everything. Your smile at the feast, your silence in prayer, the tilt of your head when Henry speaks. Whispers coil through corridors like smoke. Who will bear the sun? Who will keep the king's favor? And while the world sees romance, you begin to sense performance. Henry's affection is public, staged, meant to show his power rather than his heart. The gifts, rings, jewels, velvet, are not tokens of love, but markers of possession. Even the music feels different now, a little too loud, drowning thoughts you dare not voice. At night, in chambers lined with tapestries of saints and battles, you lie awake, hearing sounds others cannot. The scrape of a key, the soft thud of footsteps retreating, the hushed voices of guards. Freedom here is a myth. The walls may glitter, but they do not bend, and slowly the truth blooms. This is not a fairy tale, but a contract written in flesh and silence. The girl who walked through these doors believed she was ascending. The woman who now wears the crown knows she is watched, weighed, and perhaps already judged. And though no blade threatens your neck, you sense a sharper edge. The quiet promise that those who disappoint the crown do not always lose their lives. Sometimes they lose themselves. The court calls it love, but you learn quickly that here, love is duty wearing perfume. At first, the rituals feel intimate. Letters sealed with wax, a hand grazing yours across a velvet cushion. Henry's voice lowered to a whisper meant only, for you, but behind every soft word lies the weight of expectation. The air is thick with incense and iron, even tenderness smells of command. The royal bedchamber is not a place of secrets, it is a theatre. Servants hover like ghosts, recording every smile, every sigh, because a queen's body is not her own. It belongs to history, to the church, to the king's unrelenting need for a son. And though his touch may seem gentle, his gaze is sharp, counting, measuring. Each month without an heir tightens the unspoken noose. Each prayer unanswered feels like a silent accusation. The other women know this rhythm too, the quick rise of a favourite, the swift fall of the forgotten. They smile at you, jewelled and polite, but their eyes are mirrors, reflecting your fear, back at you. And when night falls, the palace changes. The candles burn lower, the tapestries seem to lean closer, and every sound, footsteps, a door, a breath, reminds you that affection here is conditional. You were crowned to love, yes, but the crown does not care for your heart. It only counts what you give and what you fail to provide. Days begin to feel like pages written in someone else's hand. Each morning brings another round of obligations. The prayers, the counsel, the quiet scrutiny of women who know too much but say too little. Henry's world is one of performances. Dinners, that glimmer with gold and silver, feasts that taste of honey and salt but never quite fill you. And always, behind the sweetness, there is the sharp tang of power. The king's affection shifts like the wind, warm one moment, cold the next, and you learn to read it in the smallest gestures. The tightening of his jaw, the way he lingers on a word. Your letters are carefully chosen, your smiles measured. Because love here is weighed like coin, the court does not forgive failure. Every silence, every barren month, is a kind of treason. You feel it in the glances of the clergy, in the murmurs of the ladies, in the careful notes of the king's advisers. Even joy is tempered by fear. An embrace shadowed by expectation, a kiss haunted by what it must produce. And when you walk the corridors at night, the palace seems to whisper. It smells of wax and old stone, of secrets locked behind tapestries, of footsteps that follow but never arrive. You are queen. Yes, but you are also a vessel, a symbol, a promise that must be kept at any cost. The crown that once glittered now feels like a silent chain, its links forged not of metal but of hope, disappointment, and the endless, unseen weight of a single unborn child. There comes a point when even silence has a sound. It's in the way the king's gaze lingers too long on another face, in the sudden hush that follows when your footsteps enter a room. The court lives on whispers, and you begin to hear your own name dissolve into them, spoken behind hands, traded like currency. The pressure of heirs becomes heavier, not just from Henry, but from the machinery around him. Priests speaking of divine order, advisors measuring your worth by your womb, courtiers smiling as if they already know your fate. Your private world shrinks. Letters are read, friendships are weighed, every gesture recorded like evidence. Even the walls seem closer, the corridors narrower, their shadows longer. You start to understand the cruelty of survival here. To remain beloved is to perform endlessly, to please a man whose love is as shifting as his temper. And when the inevitable happens, when the months stretch on without the promised son, the palace becomes colder. Words turn sharp, visits shorter, and what was once affection is now strategy. You sit beneath painted saints and wonder if they see you, if they pity you. The candles burn lower each night, the air heavier with expectation, and even sleep feels watched. You realize the truth. This marriage was never about love. It was about lineage, politics, and power disguised in velvet. And though your crown still glitters, it is now clear. It was always a cage, and each jewel on it is another link in a chain you cannot break. There is no executioner waiting for you, no sharp edge to bring an end. Instead, There is a quiet vanishing, a soft erasure of everything that made you queen. One morning you are dressed in velvet, courtiers bowing, your name spoken with reverence. The next, the world is quieter, colder. The king no longer seeks your smile, the council no longer asks for your voice. You are moved, politely but firmly, to rooms smaller and darker, where the light feels dimmer and the air smells of damp stone and old incense. The sound of footsteps grows rarer, the voices fewer, until silence becomes its own kind of sentence. You are not killed. You are forgotten. Servants who once ran to meet your gaze now look past you. Letters no longer arrive. The tapestries that once framed your triumph now frame your isolation. Exile does not always mean a distant land. Sometimes it is a castle on a hill, with its gates closed not to keep you safe, but to keep you away. You feel time slow, thick and heavy, days stretching like chains. Your body is still alive, but your name is already fading from the court, replaced by another woman, another smile. The worst cruelty is not death, but irrelevance, to be erased while breathing. And as the wind rattles the shutters of your lonely rooms, you begin to wonder which is kinder, the axe or the echo. At first you tell yourself it is temporary, that the king's anger will cool, that the gates will open again. But days become weeks, and the world beyond those walls seems to move without you. The servants are fewer now, their steps hushed, their eyes careful not to meet yours for too long. Meals arrive on silver trays, but they taste of nothing. Even the sweetest wine turns sour in isolation. The silence is almost alive, filling corners, pressing on your chest at night when the wind moans through the shutters. Sometimes you hear laughter carried on the air from far-off halls. Another feast. Another woman perhaps sitting where you once sat. Letters you write are never answered. Gifts you send are never acknowledged. The portraits of saints and monarchs watch you, unblinking, as though measuring your descent. You begin to notice things. The way the stone floor is colder each morning, the dust that gathers quicker than before, the faint smell of damp and iron, and with each passing day, the memory of who you were blurs. The crown, the feasts, the music, it all feels like someone else's story, a life you once borrowed but could not keep. Your name is spoken less and less, and soon you are no longer a queen, but simply a woman, locked away with her thoughts. The cruelty is slow and deliberate, and it seeps deeper than any blade. Here, the punishment is not death, it is time. The seasons turn, but you no longer count them. Spring does not bring flowers here, only damp air and the smell of moss on stone. Winter seeps into your bones long before the snow arrives. The castle is quiet, its halls echoing like a mausoleum, and sometimes you wonder if the world has forgotten you entirely. Letters are a memory, voices are a dream. Your only company is the scratch of your own pen, though even your words feel hollow, drifting into a void that will never answer. The portraits on the wall, once symbols of power, now feel like judges, their painted eyes heavy with pity or scorn. You think of the women who came before you, of those whose heads fell quickly to the block, and you wonder if they were the fortunate ones. To die is to be remembered. To live in this silence is to dissolve slowly, like ink in water. Your dresses hang untouched, your jewels locked away, relics of a name no one dares to speak. Outside, rumors bloom, new loves, new queens, new sons, and each story told at court erases you further. You are a ghost in your own lifetime, breathing but unseen, a reminder of what happens when a crown no longer shines. And perhaps that is the cruelest truth. The king did not need to kill you, he only needed to turn away. Years later, when your name is little more than a faint echo, history writes its story without you. The chronicles remember the king's triumphs, his wars, his loves, but you are reduced to a footnote, a shadow behind a brighter flame. The world believes the greatest tragedies were swift, the axe, the scaffold, the infamous beheadings, but no one writes about the slow, quiet deaths. No one describes the women who were set aside, displaced or erased, living long enough to see themselves forgotten. There is no poetry in being ignored, no ballads for the wife who lived. Yet the traces remain if one knows where to look. A ring tucked away in a reliquary, a signature in fading ink, a prayer whispered in the margins of a Bible. They tell of a girl who became queen, who carried the weight of a kingdom, and then disappeared without a sound. These fragments are fragile, but they are proof that you existed, that your silence was not consent but survival. And as the candlelight trembles across these remnants, you realize the cruel symmetry of power. The king's memory is carved in stone, but yours lingers in shadows, waiting for someone to ask the right question. Time moves forward, but the silence around your story deepens. In the grand portraits of Henry's reign, your face is absent, your voice replaced by the echo of others. You become a whisper in family trees, a pause between famous names. History prefers its tragedies quick and bloody. It knows how to sing for the martyr, but it stumbles over the quiet suffering of those who lived. Yet here and there, a trace of you breaks through. A letter carefully folded and hidden, an emblem carved into a forgotten chapel, the mention of a queen who was once beloved and then discarded. Scholars will argue about your choices, your character, even your worth, but they will never know the weight of each silent meal, each locked door, each night you lay awake hearing a kingdom celebrate without you. They will not smell the damp stone of your prison, nor feel the roughness of the walls you traced with your fingers. Your greatest rebellion was survival, and though no monuments bear your name, your existence reshaped the lives around you, even in absence. The courtiers who plotted, the women who watched, the king who moved on, they were all part of the story you carried alone. And so, while the world may forget, the fragments remain, waiting like seeds in dark soil for someone to uncover. Because every silence is a question, and every forgotten queen is a truth the world has not yet dared to tell. Even as your story fades, the world beyond those stone walls keeps building its myths. The king becomes a legend. The wives who died become martyrs, but the ones who lived in silence are rarely remembered. Yet there is a strange kind of power. In that invisibility, you learn that being forgotten can sometimes mean being free of judgment, free of the spectacle. Still, the loneliness clings. You wonder if your face is still known, if a child somewhere has your smile, if anyone remembers the sound of your voice. Sometimes a visitor comes, a priest, a distant cousin, a servant with kind eyes, and for a moment the silence softens. They call you my lady, not my queen, and the title stings less than you expected. You are no longer part of the game, no longer a prize to be won or discarded. What remains of you is quiet, stripped of jewels and crowds, but unbroken. The candle burns low, casting shadows across the small relics of your life. A book of prayers, a locket with a faded miniature, a piece of embroidery unfinished. These are not the trophies of power, but they are yours. They speak of endurance, of a woman who lived not for the pageantry, but in spite of it. And when you finally leave this world, it will not be to the sound of trumpets or the weight of a crown, but to the stillness of a life that refused to vanish completely. Somewhere, long after, someone will open a forgotten drawer and find your name, and for a moment, you will live again. The candle burns to its end, the last light flickering against cold stone, and the world remembers a king with 6 wives and a throne that shook Europe. But in that famous number, there are lives miscounted, not because they were lost to the blade, but because they were lost to silence. These were the women who lived, who endured the colder cruelty of being set aside, of watching the world move on without them. They were not dramatic endings, but long, echoing pauses. Each day another page turned without their name. And maybe that is why their stories hurt more. Because to die is to be immortalized, but to live forgotten is to disappear. The perfume fades, the silk rots, the letters crumble, but a trace always remains. A name hidden in a chapel ledger, a ring found in a drawer, a whispered story, passed between scholars and storytellers. And perhaps that is why you are here now, listening. Not for the king, but for them, because every forgotten queen carries a truth we rarely honor, that survival is sometimes the hardest sentence. So before you leave, think of the shadows between the headlines, of the names history did not shout, but only whispered, which is worse, to lose your life or to live and be erased. And if you believe these voices matter, if you want more of the stories that were never given a crown, let this be your gesture. Share this history, subscribe, and leave your thoughts below, somewhere. A forgotten woman waits for someone to remember.